Welcome back. All right, so number 5 draft picks. Now I know the number 4 draft pick video. I reached Luke Hughes and I was like, man, 2021 is tough to rank draft picks, but 2021 number 5 had Kent Johnson, and I felt like I think I can do a ranking and include Kent Johnson. I think I'm okay with that, comfortable. So I've gone over these picks and I've gone back and forth on a few on where I think they should be ranked. But I'm happy with where everybody's at right now. You guys can let me know in the comment section below your feelings on these picks. As we continue through what is really the dead days of summer, right? You'd have all the free agency done. We're waiting on training camp and some of the young gun tournaments and all that fun stuff that goes on. But yeah, it's definitely the dog days, the really quiet time around the National Hockey League. So list videos, why not? And starting this list off at number 16, the 5th draft pick in 2016, and that's Olli Juolevi. So famously in 2016, Jim Benning takes Olli Juolevi. Matthew Tkachuk should have been the pick, and it's something I said at the time. There's videos on the channel from when the Canucks picked Juolevi and my opinion on that. Juolevi, of course, injuries didn't help. Slow development as a result, in part, from those injuries didn't help. That's why when Canuck fans were piling on when he got blown up doing a bag skate, I didn't pile onto that because I felt like, he's gone through a lot already. Can we not just pile on top of the guy? But anyways, Juolevi, at this point in time, probably not going to get that chance at the NHL level. He's now 7 years post his draft year, so he's not going to be seen as a prospect. He's going to be seen as more of a project. And when you're in your mid-20s and you're a project, odds are you end up in the AHL. You probably end up playing in Europe as well. So for Juolevi, and it is that quick. In the NHL, there's a lot of pressure on draft picks. But yeah, it's just that's the way it is, and he ends up at number 16. Now, number 15 from the 2014 draft, and I debated about whether or not to put this player at 16 as well, and that's Michael Dal Colle for the New York Islanders. Dal Colle, it just didn't work, and again, we're 9 years out from his draft year. And for people watching this, you might be like, wow, I suddenly feel old. Yep, that's how quickly that creeps up on you. But yeah, Michael Dal Colle, a pick for the New York Islanders in what was a pretty deep draft. And so that's where that kind of stands out too, that it was a pretty deep draft in 2014. And Dal Colle ultimately ends up being a miss. Now, number 14, and I feel bad about this one, to be honest, because from 2019, it's Alex Turcotte. At the time that the LA Kings drafted Turcotte, there was plenty of energy about how good this guy was going to be and all the projections, and then injuries, right? And that's the thing. Young players, they get injured. There's still the chance that Turcotte breaks through, but with each passing year, that looks less likely. And so an LA team that has a lot of good players on their roster, they're a playoff team the last couple of years, and they've already got some good young players there as well. Is there a spot for Alex in the upcoming season? He may have to rely on an injury and stepping in as an injury call-up and, really grab the bull by the horns. It's going to have to probably be something dramatic for the LA Kings to say, hey, we'll keep him around and see what he can do. But I'm rooting for him, and I hope the next time I do this video, he's higher than 14th on the board. Number 13 from 2007. I always get his first name wrong. Carl Alzner. For years, I said Kyle. For years, Kyle Alzner. Carl Alzner, so Kyle's better, just saying. But yeah, Alzner, of course, had a decent career as a defensive defenseman, ends up signing an expensive deal, ends up getting buried in the minors as well. So an unceremonious ending for his career. I will absolutely rank him ahead of the 3 guys below, but it is hard for me to argue him ahead of any of the 12 that are above him on the list. So Alzner ends up at 13th on the board. At 12th, and from the 2018 draft. So when the Arizona Coyotes drafted Barrett Hayton at 5th, that was seen as not necessarily a reach, but he was a player that, again, we could say, well, they probably could have got him later, but he's a center. And GMs will always end up grabbing centers over wingers. That seems to be the case. Unless a winger is supremely talented, if they're similar talents, they'll go with the center. And Hayden started to pay off for Arizona in the second half of this season. So we'll see if the line with him, Schmaltz and Keller ends up having that same magic to start the season for Arizona as it did late in this past season. But yeah, Barrett Hayton really started to make a quite the name for himself. So if you're a Kings fan, maybe Turcotte ends up pulling a Barrett Hayton and just all of a sudden it's there. Because there have been times with Hayden's career where he's kind of looked lost at the NHL level and kind of invisible in games, and now that is no longer the case. Number 11, from the 2021 draft, Kent Johnson for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Johnson really did not look like a rookie. He looked like he had been there his whole life. Looked like a veteran right out of the gate. I will say, though, with prospects now when they debut in the NHL, that seems to be more and more of the case. More and more common. And maybe it's time that we retire the trope that, well, he's a rookie, he's going to make mistakes, and, he's going to look kind of out of place at times, but you're going to have to roll with it. A lot of these rookies coming in now are clearly trained very, very well, and they come in looking like veterans. And Johnson's done that for Columbus. A huge part of this rebuild for them, and Johnson may end up being the answer to that offensive issue that they've had. So for Columbus, all the best for Johnson, and maybe next year when I do this video, he's much higher than 11th on the board. Number 10, from 2011. So going back a ways for this one is Ryan Strome. So Ryan Strome, solid career, playing for the Anaheim Ducks this past season. So if you're going, where is Strome? Yeah, I did that too when I was doing up this list. I was like, where? And I'd forgotten he played in Anaheim this past season. Because, hey, Anaheim had a little bit of a forgettable season. We'll see if they can turn that around next year. And if Strome's a part of that, what they do with it. What do they do with the lineup they're going to have, and what role does Strome play? Strome has been, on some level, both a disappointment and a player who's put together a really good long career. From the standpoint of what was expected when he was drafted in 2011, probably a disappointment. However, he is still in the NHL, and you can't look at a player who's been in the NHL for more than 10 years and say, well, clearly a complete flop, because that's not the case. So, yeah, with Strome, 2011 draft pick, and he ends up at 10th on the board. Number 9. Going back to 2008, and I will say that a good example of defensemen getting better with age, Luke Schenn. The last couple of years for Luke Schenn might be the best in his career, and I mean that. I think that he has found his niche between what he had in Vancouver, and then he showed that in Toronto as well. Remember when Toronto traded for him, there was a lot of, Schenn was playing in Vancouver, but he's not going to play in Toronto. And then he did. And he played pretty well. Now, he gets quite the contract from the Nashville Predators, but Luke Schenn is a solid veteran at this point in time in his career. And, he's never going to be a Hall of Famer, but he works hard. He's a good checker, good defensively. I don't really have any complaints about Luke Schenn, so he ends up 9th on the board. Number 8, from the 2020 draft, and I mentioned that rookies come in now and they look like they fit right away. That was the case in Ottawa for Jake Sanderson as well. Sanderson's been fantastic. I think between Sanderson and Chabot, Ottawa's got a very, very bright future on that blue line. It really is something. And then there's others too that haven't made their debut yet. Like Cleven's generated some excitement, so we'll see what Cleven might get done at the NHL level. But Sanderson's been excellent and seamless transition to the National Hockey League. Number 7, and from the 2010 draft. Now, there's been times where I've done this video and fans of Nino Niederreiter have said, you've got him too low on the board. So this time around, I expect people to say, Niederreiter's probably too high. He probably shouldn't be ahead of Sanderson or Johnson. But Niederreiter throughout his career has been a good producer. Got off to a rough start with the New York Islanders. I thought the Islanders had ruined him. And then he moves along. He's been around a few teams since then. But he has been a pretty consistent 20 to 25 goal scorer. He's still that. He has a good nose for the net. He's a hard worker. And so I'm fine with him being at 7. I think that's absolutely justifiable on my part. I do expect the comment section to have some issues with some of my picks. Maybe Nino's too high on the list now. Because again, I've had where I've ranked him too low according to the opinions of some. Number 6, from the 2009 draft, so a year before Niederreiter's drafted, The LA Kings drafted Braden Shen. And if you've forgotten that Braden Shen was drafted by the Kings, don't worry about it. He ends up, of course, playing in Philly. He plays in St. Louis, wins himself a Stanley Cup in St. Louis, and has really become a very solid top six forward, good producer. Not elite, but a very good producer. And again, as long as he's healthy and in the lineup, he is reliable. Hard worker. Hard worker is really important as players get older. You can kind of glide around a little bit, maybe float when you're younger, and you've got all that talent and the excitement in your game when you do get going. But once you're a veteran, you have to put in the work, or else they'll say, well, we'll just bring in one of these young kids that want it more. And Shen definitely works. Shen works really hard, and so we'll see how much longer he's a Blue. I would think probably throughout the rest of the contract he's signed with them, but you just never know. St. Louis, unpredictable. They fell out of the playoffs. I didn't see that coming. Number 5, from the 2015 draft. This one was tough because on some level I was like, I think 4 is a good spot for Noah Hanifin, but I can't make that argument. I can't. I absolutely can't. But I can make the argument for 5th. Noah Hanifin in Calgary has been one of the more underrated defensemen in the National Hockey League. Calgary very good at shot suppression. Hanifin and Tanev have been a huge part of the shot suppression portion of the program. Hanifin is on the market. He's very likely to be traded, and I think whatever team picks him up is going to be quite happy. They may have to pay a premium for him because I think that I think Craig Conroy knows what he has in Noah Hanifin. The kid is very, well, I can't really say kid. He was drafted in 2015. What the heck? I can say kid. The kid's very good. And I remember when he was drafted, I was rooting for him right out of the gate, and I still am. I'm a fan of Hanifin's game. I think he's very, very good. Number 4, proving that the 2012 draft is not a complete wasteland when it comes to drafts. Because I saw one comment saying, just don't rate the 2012 picks. It's just a lost draft. Morgan Rielly was a solid pick by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2012. And you look at that draft and realize Rielly went 5th. The Leafs come out of that with a steal. Now, Rielly does get a lot of negative publicity around him over mistakes here and there. And he's not mistake-free in his game. But I think at this point, on some level, I think he's underrated by some and overly criticized. I'm not saying he's like, Slavin level of underrated, or Barkov's always called the most underrated in the NHL. I'm not saying he's in that category, but Rielly is a very good defenseman, and I think he's a legit top 2. And so for the Leafs, I don't put a lot of their struggles on Rielly. I don't go, yeah, well, if Morgan Rielly, had been better. I genuinely haven't. There have been other defensemen that have come through Toronto I have felt that with, but I have not felt that with Rielly. Number 3 on the board, and it's his last time on this board, as he was drafted in 2006, and it's Phil the Thrill. Now, Phil the Thrill, in terms of his offense the last couple seasons, it's clearly fallen off. But he won another Stanley Cup this year. Now, yeah, healthy scratch, I know. But that's 3 Stanley Cup rings for Kessel. He's got quite the record book now. He has the most consecutive games played, right? He has that record. And now he has 3 Stanley Cup rings as well. I think we're going to have a discussion about where does Kessel fit into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I think we're getting to that level where Phil Kessel, it could be argued, is a Hockey Hall of Famer. And so, yeah, with Kessel, does he get in? Does he not? That's a question I think we may be asking soon. At this point in time, he's still a UFA. I am curious to see whether or not teams pick him up, or if that's it for him. And so with Kessel, if that's it, then he retires on top, right? So, yeah, again, with the 3 cup rings and the key role he played in those Pittsburgh wins, I couldn't have him lower than 3rd. Number 2, from the 2013 draft, Elias Lindholm. So this is where things are interesting. The number 5 draft picks, you've got both Lindholm and Hanifin. Part of the reason I want to do this video, because Lindholm has been rumored to be on the block as well in Calgary. Lindholm and Hanifin went to Calgary together. So they're drafted 2 years apart. They're both number 5 draft picks. They're traded together to Calgary. They might get traded together out of Calgary. For Lindholm, though, I think at this point in time, he's coming off of a bit of a down year, but 64 points is still good. And he showed on a line with Goudreau just how good he could be, right? And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next. For Lindholm, could he go to Florida and get reunited with Tkachuk? Just throwing that out there. Does Columbus make a push to get him? And you already know that him and Johnny Hockey have chemistry. So in the event that he gets traded, Calgary might get a really good return for him, and Lindholm could get back to that 85 point. Doesn't he like 85, 90 points that 1 year with Calgary? But at any rate, yeah, Lindholm has become a very good forward. I remember when he was in Carolina, picking him as a guy I thought that was going to, have a breakthrough season, and he didn't. And I was like, well, I guess that's it. And then it happened. So once I give up, it happens. It's just that watch pot never boils. Happens that way with hockey players too. As soon as you throw your arms up and go, this guy's never going to amount to anything, all of a sudden, star is born. Which brings us to number one, and number one on the board from 2017, Vancouver Canucks, Pettersson. So this is the key thing when you're looking back at the Jim Benning era. You could look at 2016 and say, well, Levy was a bust of a pick. That was a terrible idea. And then you look at 2017 and go, Pettersson was a brilliant pick, and Benning proved everybody wrong. So if you're anti-Benning, you can look at 2016's draft. If you're pro-Benning, you can look at 2017's. And yes, there are still Canucks fans who believe Jim Benning, A, shouldn't have been fired, and B, was a pretty good GM. I know. Benning bros still exist. They're in fewer numbers than they were 5 or 10 years ago, and there was a point in time where I was kind of on the fence about Benning. I'm not anymore. But Pettersson was an excellent pick. Pettersson, a superstar, just had his first 100-point season. Yeah, I'm saying first because I think he's going to have more of them. And he's going to cost the Canucks a pretty penny next summer. They have to re-sign him. He's a restricted free agent. The sooner they get him signed, the better. Because next summer, a lot of big names out there, and guys are going to get paid. And the price for Pettersson is only going to go up between now and next July. So we'll see what happens. But I do have him at number one on this board. You guys can let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.